Hello, Ray.
Hello, Yassine.
How's it
Good.
going? It's another week. It's another podcast. And it's another exciting topic. Today, we're going to go beyond vibe coding. Now, you made that term up, so, I'm going to let you start on that.
Yeah. So the this I got the idea for that title from actually our first session together. Back when before we were starting to live stream these things, where we were talking about vibe coding as an idea and sort of like the way that it often gets conveyed as you just don't have to think, right?
Yeah,
And the hey, you're going to just sort of vibe and let the computer kind of do it. It's all about feelings, man. And I think it's like good software has always been
think
about
less,
feelings.
do more.
Yeah, yeah. It's more than that, right? So like there's a lot you can do to start. You can like give it a little bit and it can run, but then there's like there's I mean we talk about the hardest 5% over at State Change, right? And like how do you actually finish this? How do you create something that's going to be really create business value? And I think that the way we build with use AI to build with software changes the way that we build, but it's not a replacement for our thinking, right? And the and that's why I talk about like the whole beyond vibe coding thing. Yeah, sure, it lets us go faster, but how can you get speed and control, right? You're putting on the rocket to go behind the car, but you're leaving the steering wheel on so you can be figuring out, so you can be in control of where you're going to take it and how it's going to create real business value for you. I think when you combine those things, it can be really extraordinary. Like people who are cranky, you shouldn't use AI. That's not the right answer either, right? But that sort of requires all to look at this and say, how does it help us? That means going beyond vibe coding.
Yeah, I think when vibe coding was established, that was when the ex no coders found out that AI can write their code, and they were going very wild about it. And most of the people who never built an application their whole entire life then were able to build, you know, all their bad ideas using AI. But most of the times, what I found is you need to build it yourself to be able to understand what it truly means to have a software company, to run a business. Just giving someone who has an idea an AI or a developer back then on Fiverr, that's how we used to do things, who's able to build your idea does not mean that's going to be successful, nor that's going to be a good idea, nor that it's going to be worth the time that you're going to put into it. I think most of the times when people, back then before vibe coding, we had entrepreneurs outsource their ideas. It's just that now we have a cheaper way with more errors in them. Or probably as much, depends on how high quality the people are that you want to work with. It's just that bad execution will always have a bad product. Now you can just build it faster with vibe coding and way less, in terms of costs. But the moment you actually start building products, that is when you give up on that, have other people do it, have AI do it, and it's actually when you try to learn some of the principles yourself. For example, for myself, I was first hiring people to build stuff for me, and I didn't know how to program. I didn't know how to do this. And I was going on Fiverr, I was finding people, and I had an idea, and then they were building the idea for me. I was doing the design, and they were doing the development. And it was never quite the way I liked it. And it was never truly successful, that anything that came out of it, because it wasn't my idea. It was I had to start, and then the developer continued on with the idea to realize it. The moment I sat down and started learning Wisp, the moment I sat down and started learning Webflow and JavaScript, that's how I started out.
Right.
Maybe I started out a little bit too high directly to JavaScript. I wouldn't suggest that anymore. But I did. I was. I had some courage. And I started out there. And the moment I was able to build this stuff myself, my ideas were way better. I knew what is possible, and I knew how it is possible. And the moment I had an idea, I was like, no, I can't do that yet, but I can do this. And
Yeah.
that is a big thing. It's having this understanding, having this awareness of what's possible, what's not possible, and how to approach it. Of course, there are going to be roadblocks down the road. And that's when, I joined StateChange.ai, which has completely transformed my life. Sign up today for as little as $39.99 or $39. You even cut out the 99. I forgot about that. Look at that. It's a great discount. Sign up today. Send Ray your money. It's definitely worth it. I did 149 immediately because it was such a great value proposition. But that's when you join those communities. That's when you get this extra help. But just being able to do it yourself and just turn movements on the mouse into working software, that is the moment when you actually get really good in having those ideas, in executing your ideas. And this is actually when you see something that was like a miracle for me seeing the first time. The idea I had one-to-one translated into a product. It wasn't like, oh, I just had this idea. Today's the delivery on Fiverr. Let's look at the project. You're already excited. You get the Dropbox link, you're opening it up, and then your face goes from this to this. And you're like, oh gosh, I paid $2,000 for this.
I think about that kind of like when
I do have the same thing with Lovable, plenty of times.
Oh yeah,
See how it goes, and then it's like, oh.
There's this, I think, a repeating pattern in here. Like it also applies to marketing, right? People say, "Oh, what I need is marketing. I'm going to go outsource it to like a marketing pro who's going to go make marketing happen for me," And like, I think in both situations, what you really profit from is that software is like. I once had a really smart guy, a venture capitalist, tell me that the software solidified consulting. Which I thought was a really neat idea because it's just about like your ideas, right? It's about the product you made, and and so like the best software is when you have a pure translation between the ideas in your head and being able to convey it, right? You can convey it as content, you can convey it as consulting, you can convey it as code, right? These are three major ways you can be manifesting, right, or memorializing your knowledge, and and in all of them they reward more you. Right. So like the idea, like I'm going to have AI write my marketing copy for me is losing it. Having AI enhance or multiply your marketing copy, that can be really good. But what people want to hear from is more you. And like whenever I'm giving marketing advice, it really boils down to how can we have more you in the market? And when it's about creating software, like which is sort of the point you're making, right? Is how to have more you in the software. If you delegate, if you're like, oh, I have an idea, and someone else will go make it happen, that's a very little amount of you.
I
And
have
valuable.
the thing. I have observed plenty of people building stuff, clients, friends, colleagues, and I can tell you that nobody was truly successful outsourcing the idea. They were never truly successful when they outsourced the idea, unless you're in a room together and you have a big whiteboard and you can say, I want this to your developers. If you outsource it remotely, they were never happy with what came out of it. And they were just trying the best to make the best out of what they got. And
I think that part of that is that delegation is a skill. And people don't know how to do it. And they think that because you're giving the job to someone else, the whole thing's going to become easier. But really what you've done is you've made the whole thing contingent on not your idea to think.
You're always speaking against the wall.
Exactly. And of course, it's really expensive too. And so like you're running out of money. You're doing it in the way that you have the least competence to do it because you don't have that kind of managerial expertise.
I'm a fan of outsourcing the tasks that users can see. And they don't need to, like I do the UI, I do the backend, I do the server. I have other people add that iOS plugin that we need. That is not something that directly affects the user. And if we have a mistake on that, and we don't roll it out until it works, right? So those are things you can easily delegate to other people. And they're probably they are just probably way smarter than I am at that anyway. But just because you have the smartest in the room doesn't mean that it's going to be as you want it to be. Like you want the core structure, that will be the front end, the back end, the basic parts of that. You can do it nowadays. Like, it's not that complicated. Just throw away Supabase, start using Xano, and then use Lovable in combination with that, with the open API spec. So, you're not exposing all your users' data and API keys because you failed to configure row-level security. Or, use Nordcraft, or, use something else that's better. It doesn't matter. And I've been on a hot take recently. I have been saying it doesn't matter if you use Nordcraft for your front end, or Lovable, or WeWeb, or Wist. I know I'm I'm going against what I used to say, but you learn, and it doesn't really matter where your front end is on. If you're building a SaaS, you don't care about SEO most of the times. You can build it in Wist if you like Webflow. And of course, if you want to pay $200 per million requests for just loading a CDN file, you can host it on Wist if you want to. If you don't want to, and you need server-side rendering, you can go to WeWeb collections, and then you can use pre-render, or you can use Nordcraft, or you can use Next.js with Lovable, right? It doesn't truly matter where you are building your application, your front end on. I learned that many times. Of course, there's always a personal preference. My personal preference is anything that is close remotely to Figma, that allows me to build simple front-end logic, or even just write inline JavaScript to visual design creation. I'm big on design. I do like that. And I'm not the best designer. I'm far from that. But I do want to be able to control the UI that I'm building, and not just have AI make something that looks like every website nowadays. Right?
Yeah, right. Except, of course, I find that the look of the site is often less important than the content of it, but that depends.
Yeah, I'm the only one bothering about UI.
Yeah, well, I mean, other people can. From the front end, the brand of it, the feel of it is very important, and that's all fine. You make an excellent point about, like, there are lots of tools out there, and one thing we talk about in state change, we have a bunch of mental models we use, and one of them is something we call the shopper's mindset. And the idea is that, like, it's what is the right tool based on what's world class in terms of the tool setup at the time, which changes all the time, as you well know.
Yes.
What is your understanding of the job to be done, right? And where are you in your technical journey? Like, what's going to fit best with your work, right, for the thing you're trying to do based on where the tool is at that moment. And all those things keep on changing. But it also means it's not like there's one tool that's sort of the right way to do it and that endures. It keeps changing. And that's something I think a lot of people find scary about the world of software, is that it's not that solid. It's not that stable. But the opportunity is that we can create software, meaningful software, so much faster and with such lower cost that it's not like the artifact we create needs to last for 10 years in order for us to create payoff. It's not like
we had a great conversation in our office hours today. I think someone asked Andreas how much, how long Total can support on the money that they raise. And I think they told me that Andreas said they can run for the next 3 years on the money that they have raised. So it means they're burning like $1 million a year, 180,000 a month about. So, and then they ask, now, should we worry? What happens in 3 years? Will Total or Nordcraft go bankrupt? And Total is already far gone, right? And like, if it's Nordcraft going to go bankrupt or something, in 3 years, as I said, in 3 years, it doesn't matter. Like, don't worry about something in 3 years. We'll worry about it again in 2.5.
I think that's totally right, because another mental model from state change, which is sort of a running gag inside there, is you will build this again.
You will build this again, yes.
And because of that, like, it's just not that big a concern.
That's 3 times before it even hit the market.
So many bigger sources of risk. And really what you want to do is to sort of shift your, shift the money-making part.
I made a little joke. I said, they're open source. When they go bankrupt, I'll just make my own version with a better name.
Well, if they're open source, you don't need to wait for them to go away, right? Yeah.
We had arguments. They want me to pay a license in order to do that. So,
Okay. Which also, I guess, they're probably open core, not complete open source.
Yes.
And that, which by the way feels totally fair to me. I think a lot of people who like distribute this stuff in open source just sort of get reamed over it. Docker is a good
It's just
example
I
of
don't
that.
want to do it unless it's completely necessary because I don't like the idea of running a front end web development tool. That sounds like a lot of sleepless nights with
Yeah,
host.
there are some folks in StateChange who use open source, front end web development tools, and they sort of tweak them a little bit to their own tastes. And which I think is sort of neat because then you could take that, you combine that with use of like these AI assisted tools, right? And
Which
now
one?
you AI to
Which one?
make the tool
Oh,
itself better, build process better, et cetera.
which one? Builder IO, not AI. They're bankrupt.
Oh goodness gracious, Builder AI was a fraud.
It was big. I remember when I was doing research for competitors for Despi, I found Builder AI. And it was like, how is an AI no code tool $30,000 to make a mobile app? It doesn't add up. Now we know there were Indians making them. That's why it was $30,000.
Yeah, sort of I mean, there are other sort of AI assisted agency models, and it appeared they were just not as AI assisted as we maybe thought that they
Like
or thought they
Temple Lab
were.
is essentially Builder AI, right?
And then there's Builder IO, which
Please
is
don't send us a cease and desist. It's a great tool. We love Tempo Labs. We used to love Builder AI. It's just sad that it went that way.
the
Any
and
disclaimer, those are only our opinions expressed. We do not check validity or something.
that is a really good point. Let's not be sued for libel. I'm down with that. Down with that.
First
The
cease and desist, then you get sued. That's the way it goes.
yeah
Like in this dev mode.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember the name of that open source tool. We can probably get that into the notes. Because there are others as well, and I think there's a lot of really cool stuff out there for adding for being able to build that doesn't have nearly as large a market, right? They don't have the marketing dollars because it's open source projects that are pretty cool, and I think are far more accessible now because of
The
being integrate with these no code build the
nice
AI.
thing about open source is you can do what WP Engine did. You take something that's free and then you use it, you build your brand around it, and then you get sued by the inventor and then you settle. Or you donate to the WordPress Foundation. There you go. It's easy. It's always easier to beg for forgiveness than to ask for permission.
Right, and I actually think when we think about like building for the ecosystem, WP Engines. I mean, look, the Jason Cohen and Matt Mullenweg got themselves into a whole thing, but the idea of like building to support an ecosystem is I think a pretty good one. There are other hosts that are very like Bluehost is also really large out of Utah is a large WordPress hosting system, and so like there are many that are in this game, right? That can work relatively well. And so you figure out, hey, wait, there's this big market. How can I be part of that or be an important part of that? And that's what WP Engine was doing. And then I think that maybe WordPress is sort of looking to get more money, and that gets harder and whatever. It's always playing with others is always tricky. But when I look at like the nature, right, of AI building, this sort of gets us back to the whole beyond vibe coding thing, right? I think when people looked at like no code, low code tools, they thought of themselves as a consumer of the tool to create whatever the experience is. They're going to go create like a SaaS and go make $1 million. And what the things didn't quite work that way. But the sort of the same promise is kind of running through in that term vibe code, right? I have something, it's going to be easy, it's going to be fast, I'm going to make $1 million. And the big Bolt hackathon that's going on right now, the world's
Oh, yeah.
largest hackathon, I think is also very much in this space. People looking to quickly build something, make $1 million. But the real opportunity, I think, is like how does this change software itself, and how does this allow you to create the thing that's really special about you and be able to express more you instead of expressing the what a SaaS is supposed to look like. How can we express you in the form of software? And boy, is that an exciting opportunity, because there's all sorts of weird and wonderful software, a lot of which has like significant front ends, some which has no front end, looks more like an automation. The way we can now build agentic approaches are also really, really cool. And generative UI, like building with a chat or conversational front end, which is never not the same for any two people, is also super exciting. And these things are all possible because of working with AI, but only works if you use your brain.
Yeah, you need to use your brain. That is very important. Yeah, you're completely right with that. I love how good AI is with front ends. I want to share you something.
Please.
Let's see. How can I share? Chrome. Can you share my screen? Can you see my screen? You can see
I
my
can see
screen.
that mirror screen,
For
yes.
example, right now for Despia, I'm just using an AI tool here where I just put my design specifications in, right? Deploy using NoCode, Cloudflare workers. I got my
Mhm.
prompt. I can
Yep.
copy it from Toddle because I'm not calling it Nordcraft.
Yep.
And I can create a new page, new, and I can paste it. And then I got my interface. And now I just
Mhm.
need to add functionality. And I built this. The only reason I built this was for myself. So I built a tool for myself where I can put a prompt that I get from ChatGPT. It builds me the interface in Toddle, Nordcraft, and it will look one-to-one in there, and it will use the native styling conventions and all that, as you can see. It will even add hover, focus states, all that, and then I just need to plug in the logic, and it's trained to kind of like follow my design taste in just knocking off Chatsy and UI and Vercel stuff.
Cool.
And
Yep.
I think also a big benefit in people just building their own systems, building their own tools to work more efficiently. And that is simple because I built that whole thing with AI. So I built it with AI and AI to help me build faster with AI. It's almost like Nordcraft being made in Nordcraft. Look at that.
Well, and you can cut these things just back and forth. Earlier today we had a session in State Change where one of our members had created the MCP server for being able to create function stacks, databases, etc. in Xano. Now,
Amazing.
Xano doesn't support in their official stuff. This is like using their beta
Yeah, but
API.
nanoscript, I'm always afraid to do or say something about it because they make me sign NDA. So
But if you take a look at in fact, if anybody here is a Xano customer, if you go take a look inside your metadata API, you're going to find all these beta endpoints. The beta endpoints are actually shipped to everyone. They're not sitting behind whatever your NDA is, and actually, I probably
yeah, I'll
I'm
just
in.
let you talk about it. I'll just step out of the room for a moment.
Yeah, like saying skull and bones. The if you but now that it's public for everyone, and it practically has been sort of on the quiet now for a few weeks, as I've sort of discovered, you can make use of these APIs. And so this guy, Rob Bulos, had made something. And if you put up, like, it's called mcp.snappy.ai, and he has made an MCP server that enables one to communicate with your Xano instance. Vibe code, again, it's a term I don't really like, but like you can use a chat interface like Claude Code or anything that uses MCP, like even Cursor or whatever, to set directives to say, please go make this function stack. Please go set up whatever it is in
It was
your.
VWeb.
And yeah, that's where I was about to go with this. So he made the tool, which is super impressive by itself. The tool he used AI to help him build in Cloudflare, right, for the back end of it, because MCP is a server-side technology. The front end of it, he built using WeWeb. Front end of the user experience for sign up, for management, for administration, etc. And then the hosting for it, he did through Cloudflare. So it's just about putting together the pieces of the puzzle that at the time you're doing the work give you least friction to create things you really want to create. And he created something that was really remarkable, blowing away everybody who was in that room, and is allowing him to be a real 10x developer, relative to Xano, because it has secret sauce, and he's giving it away, the MCP server, and he's doing it because this so boosts his reputation, right? So this goes from being something that's just him, him learning about MCP, to him being able to 10x himself, to him being able to again 10x his reputation. And then and that's like the promise of what we can do with the software. It's not just we're going to create a SaaS and have customers and have that sort of everything trickling downhill, but he has that whole cycle going that's like building his reputation, building his ability to deliver. It increases his ability to charge rates as a technologist, and opens up all sorts of cool doors. And I think people who look at this technology more again, turn on your brain and go beyond just vibe coding it, there is tremendous value to create and money to be made.
We love that. That's very exciting. I mean, I'm looking at it right now. It looks very promising, and it's very exciting. And to see what what the future just holds, and how AI is changing all those kinds of things that we used to do all by hand. Um, I'm curious. You have insights in state change. How relevant is WISD in the age of AI for people right now?
We have a couple members who are using WISD, fewer than we used to. But actually the folks from FinSuite came over, I guess a few months ago, gave a presentation on like the new generation of
Yeah,
WISD.
I took a look at it. It's just they just named the actions events. And
Well, whatever, but like they're actually pretty thoughtful about how they can be leveraging, people who want to build more with AI, because WISD is a neat. I really like FinSuite's approach to WISD, because they never had all the money that like
oh, yeah.
Nodecraft does or WeWeb does in terms of having fundraisers or
They're
whatever.
actually profitable. That's the difference with all the
Agency, they never had any access to capital, right?
yeah.
And so everything they do is with an eye towards how does this create value for our customers today, and that's very clarifying. And one of the tricks they've used, they decided, and this they took a while for them to figure out this what they were about, but they did figure it out for like I think the third version, that their target are developers who want to go faster, right? So they're going to provide the superstructure in the form of the Wiz runtime, but then you're largely putting in JavaScript, and so helping people get that JavaScript better and faster is something they're onto. And so being able to take things like examples of here's the variables you have in context, so you can copy them out and put them into like ChatGPT and then copy and paste back. They recognize that was a big part of the workflow. So instead of them trying to make the tool do those things, they made it easy to get the data out of their tool to do those things in ChatGPT or Claude or whatever you want to use, and then bring it back in. Now they became independent of what the state of the art in those tools were. They weren't trying to chase the Joneses in a way that like WeWeb right now is trying to make a better experience, and they're fighting with Lovable and Bold. Right? They're all trying to make the integrated experience.
I don't
Whereas they're
like AI, what I've seen in the forum.
work.
Yeah, people really don't like the WeWeb AI, what I've seen in the forum. Like, I think it was Roberto who commented and said something like, when is it finally going to actually work or something? I tried it out a few times. It just made up things. I said, I want a form that does this. And it says, yeah, we could just use the wwlib activate action method. And I was like, I never heard of that. And then I looked it up. It doesn't exist. And then I just wrote like a whole workflow with that method that was never there.
Yeah.
But that was like a month ago. I don't know if that changed.
Yeah, it's always improving. I'll tell you, workflows are something AIs do not do super well. It's a hard problem, and particularly they don't do well with front-end technologies doing workflows, because most front-end technologies are not designed around doing workflows. It's a state machine for like responding to human interaction, and like we sort of have to force it a bit to have it do more complicated workflows. But the other aspect is I think it's very hard to change your stripes. Like if WeWeb and I actually talked to a VP of marketing, I think a month ago, who commented that the company she was working with was community led, and she did not mean that as a compliment, which I thought was really a neat point. Because what she was saying was that because their community was leading them around, they were responding to what their existing customers wanted, right, and making all of these marginal improvements. Whereas there's a whole market of people who weren't their current customers, who weren't being heard from, they weren't in the community, and that meant they weren't getting growth, right? So they were kind of optimizing for this, relatively small pool of people who had chosen to join them the first time around. That made their initial customers happy. They could have this very happy dance, but the customer wasn't growing as a result. Like I said, it was a marketing person. They're like, well, how do we get more market?
Nordcraft is doing a similar thing. They're now chasing ex-React developers. So like, I don't know if you saw that they were on Code TV, and they made like a challenge with real developers on how fast they can build an application, and they're now marketing it as node-based web development. So if AAA games are built in Unity or whatever that thing is called,
They did Unreal Engine blueprints, right? Yeah.
Yeah, why don't you do a web application that way? And they're now targeting real developers with that. And then also the fact that they're open source. So they completely abandoned now the no code market. But it was fun. They made a poll in the Discord. How many of the users here actively using Nordcraft are no coders versus developers? It was like 70% were no coders. And now they're just like completely going in, no, we're for professional developers.
Well, it's a tricky thing. Like, how much money is there in no code? And even if 70% of their audience is no code, it also highly correlates with people who are joining the free tiers or the minimum tiers or what have you. As long as people describe themselves as no coders, they tend not to be an audience with willingness to pay. The people who have gotten themselves to a point where they're shipping tend to describe themselves as more technically adept. They don't describe themselves as no coders.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting change because they're aiming for people who right now are building applications by hand, who are using React, and they want to have a more professional version of doing that. Like probably the people in Stage Change who are using open source technology to build their applications more visually, right? I think it's an interesting change. I think it would be hard for people because like with AI, it's just so easy to spin up a React application. I remember like a year ago when you taught me React and you were like, oh, we just use cursor and create React app. And we made like some node-based workflow builder. It was pretty cool. And I was like, with that big ecosystem, you got React Flow, you got React Charts, you got Vercel with all their libraries and everything. And like, what are the chances developers are going to go with an ecosystem that doesn't support that has packages made by no coders? You know what I mean?
I do know what you mean. I think I think the issue ecosystem is a big one. And we talked about WP Engine and
That's
Mullenweg.
why I think it's sad that Nordcraft isn't running on React or Next.js because it would have such a big ecosystem just opened up to itself.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But we don't have it because now that you just got to use vanilla JavaScript. You got to bring it in with a CDN. And most modern SDKs are NPM only. And you know that when you work with WeWeb. We said, oh, no, I can't use the NPM plugin to bring that in because it just brings in the CDN. We got to do this as a view component.
Right.
Right.
And why not have the view component? This is like what the AI can do relatively.
Right. The downside in Nordcraft is there are no view components or React components.
Right. You don't have a code component to work with.
You don't have the component that can bring in the Vue or the React-based libraries. So you always have to look for CDN-based libraries, which will bring you back into the age of jQuery.
Yeah. So there's this company that shut down a couple months ago that I admired a great deal called FastGen. And the FastGens, FastGen had a few different parts to its pitch, but the thing I think really separated it in the market was they had very good code steps. And so they were a back-end builder. They kind of competed with Xano, they compete with BuildShip. And the crux of their value prop, I think, was that they could do like, boxes and arrows flows for their, building out the logic for like a cron process or for an API endpoint or whatever. But then you could at any point stick in a code component that could be either in Python or in Node.js. And that meant you could use all the SDKs, you could use all the pip packages. You could introduce whatever complicated logic you wanted to do. I had it install LangChain. That was one of my first tests with them, and it pulled it off. And you could do really cool stuff inside those code blocks, but not have to commit to having the whole thing be code, right? You could like have sub code pieces. So instead of like a Lambda, which is all the code for a given endpoint, you could have mostly no code, and then like the one hard part. That hard.
But now Xano has it too, and it's such a great thing. I built a facial recognition system in Xano with the NPM package, and it works amazing. It's very accurate. I got a whole facial recognition system in there. So
yeah, Xano has now caught up to that.
And it will say it's Ray. It's pretty cool.
Xano's caught up to that. I think it substantially changes the way one can build with Xano now. And when I'm consulting people at the higher ends of Xano, like I'm often bringing in, they're like, "Oh man, but do I want to do this with no code?" I'm like, "Why do we do it with no code? Let's just use the Lambda for that part." And then, but then I got to do code for the rest. No, you don't. And now you can sort of use the best of both worlds.
Yeah, I love that. That is a big thing with Xano. I would love like an NPM import because most NPM packages that you just you have to do in the build machine like installing dependencies on Swift or something, where you just have to import the npm packages. They do work with vanilla JavaScript. It's just they don't have a CDN. I don't want to give you a CDN because it's not compiled that way, right?
You mean on the front end? You mean for the front end stuff?
On the front end.
Yeah, because Xano has that support for the
Yeah,
the
but having something like Xano did it, where you could just import any npm package, and then it will be part of your Nordcraft build, and it will be there as a web component or something. That would be something that is, because that is right now the big ecosystem gap that I see in Nordcraft. You can't bring in a Vue component, you can't bring in a React component. You will have to use libraries that are CDN only or support ES6 module imports, which is not everything, because nobody is using the CDN anymore or loading packages client side. They're already including that in the whole application because most is React, which that is kind of like pretty sad because it kind of like cuts out half of the modern ecosystem out there.
Yeah, and then you get to tools like I mean, sort of, you've got on the one hand, Nordcraft, which is like we're sort of stiff arming the AI a little bit. I like the way you're basically using Clipboard, right, as a way of transporting information from your micro app that builds things with AI into Nordcraft. You have things that are more like
Nordcraft, they're working on an AI, and they said like it will be done in 3 months or so. And I was like, I guess I got to do my own one.
They'll work at whatever pace they work, but I know I'm going to have done. I will have built and sunsetted like several things before those 3 months have passed, right? So like that means
like I need AI right now, and I built it I think like a year ago or so, and it's been working great. And that's why I'm so fast, and that is why I can make progress so fast. And I don't want to build stuff by hand. That is very boring.
Yep. I also think that like the fact that AI can build, I think that we should ask like, what does that mean for software, right? Right now we're looking at how can we build the same app you would have built in 2021 faster, right? Instead, what is the app that you can and should build in 2025 that's different from what you would have built in 2021, right? As a result of having access to this technology. And this gets back to the point that you were making before, right, about building tools, right? Like you built that tool, right, that can put things into Nordcraft that's allowing you to go faster.
Yeah.
There's then the level above that of what can you make for customers that's taking advantage of the fact that AI knows how to create code on demand. And that's a whole field that's called generative UI, and that I find to be super exciting as like the next phase of what front end development can look like. And I'm hopeful that because I like a lot of these low code no code vendors, I like their teams. But the model they have, like putting you on Rails to build something that looks like a web app, doesn't look like setting you up for what's next. And I'm really excited about like the companies like the Crayon package, Assistant UI is a company that's doing this. Vercel has a play in the space that are all about creating UIs that are dynamic, they're just different for each person based on the question you're asking, based on the things that are useful to you, and that is totally different. And that's also like a whole beyond vibe coding thing, right? It's not like how do you use vibe coding to make the same crap faster, but rather what is the new stuff that adds more value over the top.
Yeah, I can actually show you something that I'm working on right now. Lots of behind the scenes today. So I'm in Nordcraft here, and I'm building a component for a widget builder. And
we need a Viking helmet or something to go up each time we mention or like show Nordcraft or something.
We'll see if we can get that sorted out within this. But I got like a widget builder here, and I had my AI kind of like build, the start for me. That was it. And I turn it into this, which I think looks a little bit nicer already. And then I have my widget deployed as a Xano worker in here, which this is how those widgets get deployed. They get deployed as an API endpoint that loads the dynamic SVG. And this is how we load the widgets into Despia, so you can build them in Xano. And then what we're doing is, because I think most people will probably want this NoCode, so we're going to have a template on a Xano API that will allow you to build those widgets with dynamic data coming from your backend to be updated on the home screen. You can deploy with NoCode Xano, or you can deploy with code using a Cloudflare worker. We give you both options, and we have like 2 templates how you can deploy such a widget yourself. What I don't want to do is I don't want to provide a service where you can pay $20 a month and we host the widget for you, because the last thing I want to do in my life is run a hosting company. I don't need that stress. So we just outsource the hosting part for the stuff that is hosted with Despia. We just outsource the hosting to other companies and say, here is a super simple template. You can host that part. The widget right now is the only thing you need to host yourself. And we just give you like a template so you can host it either for free on a Cloudflare worker with a very generous free tier, or you can host it for free on, Xano, if you want to have it visual. And then I hope that, now this July, Xano will have the $29 plan out there. So it'll probably be cheaper anyway when it comes to requests than us providing you hosting for $50 per million requests, which I thought about doing, but I don't want to run a hosting company. It's too much hassle. I just rather have you pay for the Despia license, and then that's it. And we don't have to carry your infrastructure. It's too much responsibility. I do it like Zap here. I just refer them to Make.
Yeah, but from the old origin story there, yeah.
Because we would just run it Cloudflare anyway, so it will cost us 30 cents per million views. Why don't you just go directly to Cloudflare? And if you don't want to use Cloudflare for whatever reason, we've got a template for you that's plug and play. And if that still doesn't work for you, use Xano. It's $29, and you probably already use it.
Right, or go use one of these, freer guys like Netlify, Vercel, which have super generous free tiers.
It's just you need to have a dynamic backend server that's building an SVG. So you need to get data from your database with an API call, then plug the data into the SVG and deliver the SVG. It's just easier to do that in a worker or Xano. And it works really well with Xano.
Yeah, Worker will do it super cheap because the way that workers work, because they're not really node runtime. It's also really interesting conversation to have, how durable objects work, etc. But but in Xano is all about making it super easy, and because they're instance based, you're not worried about running up a huge bill because it's all sitting inside this one prefix.
Oh, I have to ask you one thing, because they've been shitting on me in the Nordcraft Discord. Is Xano a virtual machine or not?
Oh yeah. Well, the build.
It's not, and so I said Xano is a virtual machine. It's not like Subase where it's server, where it's like a cloud instance based, where you serverless, and whatever you eat, that's how big your invoice gets. And someone in the Nordcraft community said that's fake news. That's not true. Xano is not a virtual machine. It's like Subase.
No. Xano is okay. Well, I mean, Xano software can be deployed a few different ways, but like there's the build plan that's free, where
that is probably what he was referring to.
It actually has sort of a serverless quality to it, but which is a huge pain for them because architecturally it's so different from what their paid plans are. Yeah. All paid plans, all the paid plans, self-serve paid plans, Xano, basically they rent a virtual machine on your behalf, give it the IP address, give it the the URL, and then they load in a bunch of Kubernetes pods into there that basically sum up to the Xano.
So your Xano workspaces are the containers, and then your instance is the VM.
Well, actually, the workspace, I'm not sure the containers don't really correlate to the workspace. That's not the axis of it. There's one that's for the the web server, for like running the Nginx web server. One that's for the database. One's for the Redis. One's for all the Lambdas actually run in another one of those containers as well.
So you have different containers in your So your Xano instance is a VM. That VM virtual machine has many containers. One container runs your database. One container runs your Lambda system. One container runs your API and MCP or whatever.
Yeah, that's called application-centric containerization, and that's very common actually when you go look at virtual machine built systems, like things that run on-prem or what have you. Nowadays, it's much more common to see that you have your VM. Your VM is basically running a bunch of Docker containers or running Kubernetes cluster, and then each application kind of gets their own piece to sort of protect memory, security, all sorts of.
So it doesn't happen with Xano when I'm purchasing for $249 my VM. I'm not sharing that with someone else. I get a VM, and that is only mine, and that VM has containers one container is for the Lambda, one container is for this, one container is for this, but it's all just for my workspace, for my instance.
Yeah. Total separation between your stuff and somebody else's stuff.
I just wanted to get that on camera to prove I was right, but thank you so much.
There's like a centralized authentication system, and then there's the opportunity to make it more complicated because they offer something they call auto scaling, but the technical term for it is horizontal scaling. So that if you have a box and your box like running against the edge because you're utilizing it too much, particularly in like peak usage situations,
Yeah.
like times a day or times a year or whatever, then they will offer horizontal scaling, which is like parallel machines that basically clone your code but all talk to the same database in
Yeah.
order to get more power out of that. But in
I have
general, yeah, it's based.
I have one question to you. Let's say I'm doing an API call to my database. I'm getting a value. I'm putting it into a variable that's an SVG, and I'm returning it on the Zeno $99 plan. How many calls can I do a month of that? I need to have like some calculation, and ChatGPT is not helping me because it doesn't know what I'm really getting with Zeno, but you know everything in and out.
I don't know how many you could do that.
Just like a rough estimate, just a rough estimate. I can refer people back to the video.
Yeah, so I'm expecting sort of has like probably like a gig of memory, and each of those processes are going to take like 30, 40 megabytes of memory. You can sort of do some division on that and say you can use roughly half the memory for doing your job. So like if you have half, let's call it 500 megs and over 30, that implies you can do maybe 15, 20 maximum simultaneous requests. Now, the key is you don't need simultaneous requests because the faster each request goes, the more you're sort of freeing up lanes right on the highway to be able to move through.
Yeah.
So what I have found is that a lot of people respond to I'm having troubles with Xano by paying for bigger instances. When I find that the better move first is you do a little bit of investigation, you can find out which your slow endpoints are.
So let's say I have an endpoint that takes about a millisecond or less to get data. It's a very quick one. It just gets like one step, get database, set HTTP header, return the data. Right?
Okay, so now math out from there. If you have something that takes a millisecond, right, to clear through, and it's going to take more than a millisecond, but let's just use that for math. Okay. The implication is if you can do 20 at once, right, and I'm just going to use that number for ease. If you can do 20 at once, and each one takes a millisecond, you can just take the product of those, and that means it's 1,000 per second, right? You should do the product of those two things, you get 20,000.
There's no limit on Xano and how much I can actually do. I just can't reach the ceiling at that given moment.
So if you hit the ceiling, it will queue behind,
okay.
Right? So like you can get more requests, and like, oh well, you gotta wait. This happens all the time with requests. If the waiting happens too long, or if the waiting room itself fills up, okay, now you can have a problem, and this can lead to running out of memory. Thing keels over. You have 503 errors, and like that's not a very good time. This becomes why you do things like rate limiting. So the same user is asking you for a bunch of slow it down. This is where you might just throw more money at it eventually if you're really hitting high speeds. But the other thing I'm going to say is there's almost no request takes like 1 millisecond. Most requests take like 50. A really fast one will take like 50 milliseconds in order to clear the system. Much more likely it's going to take a couple hundred milliseconds. And when you consider that, that means your request rate looks much more like 100, right, than it does look like those couple thousand. And if you're slower than that, well, they can go down and down and down. And your big opportunity is to how to make that go faster.
So let's say I'm just doing one API call, I'm getting like an off me or something, and I will be running that endpoint every 5 minutes for 1,000 users on the $99 plan with Xano. Is that feasible?
5 minutes, 1,000 users. Wait, you're running it as an endpoint. Or you're running it as a task.
As an endpoint, like an off me, like when you go to a page to protect it, to see if the page is.
Okay, I get you.
Yeah. A very use case in Despia where your widget runs an API call every 5 minutes. So I'm just trying to see if this will work.
I'll tell you, pull-based systems are very expensive for the reasons we were describing. So what you'll find is that if you want something that's sort of trying to be aware of being up to date, this is where using something like a real-time or a notification system can pay some dividends.
Yeah. What's going on is with Apple Smart Widgets, you can only pull data, but you can't pull it conditionally necessarily. So what we're doing is we have an endpoint where your
Mhm.
widget updates in the background. So your application is and you can adjust the number. You can do every hour, but it's every like default is 5 minutes. Every 5 minutes, it's calling an API, getting data, updating the data in your widget.
Oh,
So
I
like
see. Yeah.
calories, your macros, or your, whatever you kind of build. So the widget is always up to date, like a weather widget in Apple. And I just want to know, like, let's say you have 1,000 app downloads and you run this every 5 minutes. It's a like 50 millisecond request. Very simple. Would this work? Or would that kind of like be when Zeno on the $99 plan starts sweating?
Well, it depends on how efficient you are in terms of spreading it around. But let's just doing quick math on it. Like 5 minutes, that's 300 seconds. So if you're talking about 1,000 users over 300 seconds, that means you're doing one request roughly every 300 milliseconds.
Yeah.
That sounds pretty doable on its own, right? That seems fine. So usually but it's not the averages that get you. It's where the peaks are, you know. So like the more this can sort of be
It's
spread out.
probably pretty spread out because every app will run it every 5 minutes. So it will,
Well, and if everybody runs it on the minute, just for the sake of argument, that can
yeah.
create weird peaks. And so you just sort of pay attention, like how spread out that is. But that'd be the way.
Counting software worker, I'm not going to lie.
Well, I think that workers are just so cheap to run. The big virtue of working with Xano, I think, is how quickly and easily you can create and express your intent.
Yeah.
But another trick I've used with Xano is I've taken like an endpoint and used like we have the state change extension for Xano. So like state change, in addition to being community, we've also got tools for our members, and one of them is like this extension for Xano, right? So right now, by my count, there are 3 in production development tools for Xano: Eli Beachy's Bubble plugin, the state change extension, and Robert Boulos's MCP server, right? Sort of the 3 big things out there. But the state change extension has like you can go to any one of your endpoints and click make documentation. And that's nice. You can sort of save your documentation. But the really cool thing is you can take that documentation as Markdown and give it to AI, and AI can go rebuild your logic, say in JavaScript or something, and maybe you can go redeploy it in code or what have you. And
You
this
got to take a discount for the Xano extension now for everybody using Despia with the widgets.
and that can be something that you might choose to use as a way to make everything go faster. It's like, well, how about instead of going through Xano, we go through Cloudflare and then have Cloudflare
I'm
call.
afraid of this, but I think I will have to make a virtual, like a visual builder for configuring those widgets outside of Xano that will
Yeah,
just give you the code that you can dump just into a Cloudflare worker. Or maybe we will have an integration to one-click deploy it.
and that could be cool.
I do like
That's where things like being able to create the code, being able to help you out with deployment to the right place. And then Cloudflare gets really excited about that, right? That gives them more stuff that is going to drive up demand.
I don't want to run the hosting. As long as we're using your account, it's all fine. It's a responsibility I don't want to do because it's just too much support for too less money.
Well, you know that like Windsurf has a relationship with Netlify. They did this partnership like I think maybe a month or 2 ago, where they're just to make it really easy that if you build something using Windsurf is a AI assisted code editing tool for people who don't familiar with it. And they have like now easier like one click or whatever support with Netlify. So now you can get your stuff up onto Netlify if you're doing it with Windsurf. They don't keep you from using anything else because you can use GitHub integration to go into any of these tools. But that idea of Windsurf doesn't want to be in the hosting business either. They want to be in the tool business, right?
Yeah, I
So
want to say that.
and so business development to facilitate increasing the value for their customers and probably maybe creating some money for themselves, but also definitely marketing value. You sort of get to go that way. So I was thinking like what you were just describing, like helping them get over to the place that will serve them better. This is really antithetical, I think, to what a lot of the low-code, no-code players do, because a lot of them are, we want to host your stuff, and that's the way you're going to be paying
them because I don't like them.
But be paid for the value you create. I think there's a real lesson in there. Like if you're a great tool, be paid for being a great tool. Don't try to get paid for being a host if what you are is a great tool, because you'll be a crappy host.
hosting from all the no-code tools completely sucks. It's always down and it's not reliable at all. And they should just focus more time on having a good editor.
And then they just also need to figure out how to get paid for that. And all of them are trying to figure out how to get paid.
Right? With the GitHub integration that they just opened up.
What? And some of them are increasing their rates for those kinds of integrations. But yeah, like it should be that this tool is so great that you never want to have to live without it. And if that's the case, you'll keep on paying for it month over month, year over year. That would be great. Having a tool vendor try to be in the infrastructure business, I think, is very tough.
Yeah.
I think Xano is an interesting play in that, and BuildShip too, because they both realize they are in both businesses right now. And whether it's good for them to be in both businesses isn't totally clear to me. But Xano definitely is about providing infrastructure. That's because you pay for these scale plans or whatever for paying for more iron, right? But then we talk about, well, why do you use it? You use it because of the tool. The disparity between those things is a tension that I think creates strategic challenges for them in the market.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think I don't want people to pay like for an inflated amount of hosting. My job as the tool vendor should be make sure that the tool is better, that the tool itself provides value, and then charge through that. And not charged by selling them very shitty infrastructure for 50 times of the price that it cost me to run.
Yeah, and that requires having a conversation with the market and that they're willing to pay. I have found in state change, there's a willingness, right? People are looking for help. They're looking for tools. They're looking for whatever. There's willingness to pay for those things. Now the question is, like, would that support a venture business? I don't know, but that also maybe points to like how the whole market evolves, and that evolutionary aspect of the market can be a pretty interesting topic for us for next time.
Yes, I mean, I think we definitely went beyond vibe coding today.
Beyond.
It's wonderful. Yeah, but I like that vibe coding companies don't sell infrastructure.
Yep.
They don't.
Important thing.
Barely, but they barely do.
Well, Vercel, I thought, was an interesting play by an infrastructure company to provide a vibe coding platform to help sell more of their more buying on them.
They're getting filthy rich by all those tools integrating with Superbase.
Yeah.
But that is very cool. I mean, right now, like what my goal is to have a REST API coming very soon for Despia. So that you can have REST API.
Look for Despia.
With that REST API, you can upload your web application code as a remote URL, and then it's going to deploy your application, and you will have webhooks if there's a deployment error and all that, so you can completely use the whole infrastructure. And for that, if you want to get access to that, there will be like a monthly subscription to that, which will be like, I don't know, $20 a month. So you can use the REST API and to get webhooks and to kind of like automate that. Because I was like, we can go into two directions. We can either start charging money for infrastructure and gatekeep some of your code, which I don't want to do. It doesn't make sense. Mm-hmm. Or we can start adding features to it that are independent from the core of the technology itself that some of our power users really want, and they are willing to pay for them. And what's $20 a month to get API updates for your whole entire workspace, right? It's not much, and if you really need it, it's a good deal. Because otherwise it's just not there for you. You would have to use an email scraper, and that would be too much, right? So we're trying now to add those things in there to have like a subscription we can sell, like Despia Pro, which gives you everything that is kind of like cloud-based, where we have an API for you to deploy things. You can get webhooks when an API was successful or not, so that we don't have to become an infrastructure company, because I hate doing that.
We should. Can we quickly put up the Despia QR code?
Don't do anything wrong. We're doing great on selling the templates alone. It's just that people ask for it. Like, we don't need more money. We're doing fine. It's just nice having recurring revenue that you can count on to, so you can hire more people in engineering. That it's not like you have this amount of sales this month and it's astronomical, and then next month you have like 5. which happens when you sell a one-time purchase. So we're trying to see how can we provide more value for people without having to gatekeep your code and abstract your ownership from your application. How can we add things to power users who really want that? So like every time there is an update, you can get a webhook, and then you can automate that with your Slack to notify your client that there was a new update to their application that has just been submitted to the App Store and all those kinds of things. But those are things we're exploring. We don't need to do them right now because we're doing great. But I don't want to be a hosting company.
No, we will continue to not being hosting companies. I think that is a good ambition.
How's it going with Heavy Lambda with your hosting company?
Oh, yeah, well, the Heavy Lambda as one of my initiatives has sort of faded a little bit as Google Cloud Run got better.
I don't blame you. Also, you don't want to be in the cloud infrastructure business.
Do not want to be in the infrastructure business. So how can I be more in the tool business? The closest we have to that right now is ScriptTag. ScriptTag is actually a pretty good place to be in the hosting business because people who are using it have a hosting problem, right? And this solves it through like micro hosting. But things are like bigger, like the kind of problems Heavy Lambda solves. Increasingly, sort of finding that the better tool for the job is to use something like GCR, and plus AI dev, right? And then you put those two things together, and like, man, there's so much you can create so fast, and it can handle a lot of weight.
Yeah, that is amazing. Yeah, wonderful. Perfect. It was a pleasure talking to you. I can't wait to do this again next time.
Absolutely.
And wonderful. Thank you so much for all your time. And all of you, so much for